For the following session, Professor Andrew Lian will lecture on the subject of learner-generated individualized learning resources in the age of AI. One of the pioneers of modern technology-enhanced language learning in Australia, Professor Andrew Lian is an Emeritus Professor of Languages and Second Language Education at the University of Canberra, Australia. His area of expertise is creating frameworks for foreign and second languages. He has also held further professional leadership positions at Bond University and James Cook University in Australia. And in addition to self-adjusting and self-organizing learning systems based on rhizomatic principles, his current research interests include neuroscience, perception, and cerebral lateralizations as they relate to language learning. And he has also maintained a particular ongoing interest in the uses of modern technology to enhance language learning since the late 1970s. Please welcome Professor Andrew Lian to the virtual stage.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about something which has been on my horizon for many years. I'm probably older than all of you, and I've been around for a while, and these things matter. By the way, I'm not just Professor Emeritus at the University of Canberra. I also work in Thailand at Suranaree University of Technology in Nakhon Ratchasima, and also at Ho Chi Minh City Open University in Vietnam. Let me start by saying two things. First of all, thank you to the students here at Silpakorn University for creating this conference. I think it's a wonderful initiative. I think it's been, there's a lot of things happening, and I think that the fact that we are now able to have conferences of this kind very easily, I think is great. So congratulations to the students, and also to Ajahn Chaiwat Kyaupanyam for suggesting my participation. I'm grateful to him, and also grateful for his creation of the, not creation necessarily, but for his work with the conference. And of course to the deans and the people who run the university, the administration. Second thing I'd like to say is that, before I do that, I also want to signal the fact that a number of my students from Ho Chi Minh City are attending today, and I'd like to welcome them also. So we've got kind of an international audience for the meeting. Now, I will talk a little bit in general terms, in general educational terms, but because I work in language education, my examples will be taken from language learning. However, the principles that I will talk about will reflect general educational principles. Okay? And I don't mind if you wish to interrupt me. I'm happy for you to speak. It's very lonely when you are on Zoom, because you're speaking to a void. You're speaking to the ether, as it were. So let me begin by saying a few things. First of all, everybody knows this. We live in extraordinary times. It's kind of an amazing moment in history, probably the most amazing moment ever, but probably not the most amazing moment in the future. So things are changing, things are improving, I think. And this is largely because of technology. As a consequence of this, 21st century society has evolved new expectations. In particular, we have developed the attitude that you need to fix my problems, not yours. And we need to do it my way, not yours. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that people have developed a habit of fixing their problems and fixing their difficulties in such a way that they are personalized. And this is something that is very, very important. In normal daily life, people expect highly personalized solutions to their individual problems. They want it, they need it now, and they are actually getting it now. Very important. And this attitude is built into society, and people not only get personalized help, but they also learn from it. What I mean is something like this. Imagine that your printer has broken, and what do? You go to Google, you go to YouTube, now you go to ChatGPT, and you ask for help. And you get it. And if you don't get the right kind of help, then you will get another chance to get a new kind of help, which will be suitable for you. And as we do these things, we learn from them. Now, this is very important. In other words, we don't learn just from going to school. We don't just learn from being taught things by official people called teachers. We have learned to learn, and we are learning better and better to learn. In other words, people know how to learn. And this is characteristic of what's called rhizomatic learning, or self-organizing learning environments. And I'll talk about those a little bit later. Rhizomatic learning, or SOLs. And now, two huge events have occurred connecting technology and education. The first one was COVID-19. Terrible, terrible thing, but it galvanized the world into trying very hard to teach online, or at least to teach using technology. And the second thing, of course, that happened is ChatGPT and other language learning models, large language models, and AI generally. Now, add to this the growth of do-it-yourself learning, and particularly language learning for me. If you look on the right, there's a lot of stuff about talking to ChatGPT. Everybody says how ChatGPT will translate for you. Everybody tells you how ChatGPT is going to help you learn whatever language by yourself. Now, so you put all of these things together, and we have all the ingredients for technology to step in and improve the situation of learning. Especially as there is this convergence between the do-it-yourself social practices and some new theoretical directions in education, specifically rhizomatic learning, where I've been doing quite a lot of work. You've seen references by me. Lian, by the way, my name is pronounced Lian, but it doesn't matter. Lian, Lian and Moore, Lian and Sangaroon, and so on, and self-organizing learning environments. And the big name there, of course, is Sugata Mitra, who did the hole-in-the-wall experiments that you should all know about and connect with. So in this context, we can think of the world as a big rhizomatic system, or as a big self-organizing learning environment. And we need to do a lot of research to see if this works or not, yes. But experiments already undertaken suggest that it does work, and without prescriptive, obligatory guidance by teachers or other activity controllers. And this is really important because administrations, education systems, teachers, and so on tend to be controlling. So for the latest book on rhizomatic learning, 2023, you can have a look on the right. I mention it simply because I and Panyatan Sangarun wrote an article in there called Rhizomatic Learning Systems and Precision Language Education. We might as well know about them. Rhizomatic learning systems, I'm going to use a long list of words here, sorry, let me take this back for a moment. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Rhizomatic systems are dynamic. They are not fixed. They are non-hierarchical. There are no bosses and no structural curricular bosses and sequences that have to be followed. They are exploratory. They are consultative. You can talk to people and get help. They are nomadic. You don't have to be in one place, and you don't have to be in one place intellectually either. They are supportive. In other words, you can get help, and they are necessarily resource rich, both human and other resources. And we have to emphasize that when we talk about resources, human resources are very important, but they're not the only ones. They provide opportunities for learners to self-manage and solve their moment-to-moment learning problems on a just-in-time basis. So what do I mean by just-in-time basis, and what do I mean by moment-to-moment learning? Well, you know, and we all know, that when we are trying to do something, we have to tackle difficulties. We have difficulties that we encounter, and we need to solve these difficulties at that time, not at some other moment when people are, when we will do officially homework and so on, or when our teacher tells us what to do. We need to fix the problems now. That's called just in time. And we have to manage that ourselves every moment of our learning life. So, as I said before, and I'll repeat it because it's a recurring theme, there are multiple convergent factors in the collective unconscious of modern society that justify the growing inclination for rhizomatic learning models and personalized solutions, such as the quasi-automatic personalization of do-it-yourself solutions that we have now through things like Google, the Google effect. If you haven't heard of the Google effect, you should. YouTube and ChatGPT. The Google effect is basically that you don't have to remember everything, but you need to know where to find answers. And there's some interesting stuff which has been done on that. Now, the concern with education, let me move this down. The concern with personalization in general is reflected in educational research, with the growing recognition that people are different and require personalized and individualized assistance in their learning, rather than the application of a one-size-fits-all approach, as is still commonly practiced. Don't kid yourselves. People say, oh no, I will personalize my class, but in general, it doesn't really happen very much. Accompanying this change is the understanding that learners engaged in complex learning tasks experience these moment-to-moment difficulties that I mentioned. And, of course, they do it when they need it, which is called just in time. So what does this all mean? Well, a natural consequence of the situation is that emphasis in course design will necessarily move away from preset activities to personalized activities. It also means from person to person, we understand differently. We understand differently. We make meanings differently. And that's a key to education. And until now, we've had to rely primarily on books with their fixed structures and content. The book is the book, and you cannot change it. You can read it, or you can read a different book. And of course, academically, a book is a prestigious object for the writer of the book. Now, wouldn't it be nice to create a book that provides learners with a personalized experience while still meeting the teacher's needs. And indeed, modern technology will enable us to do just that and go beyond anything that we have been able to achieve so far. It is a super exciting time for education. And so here's an example of a dynamic book. It's an example. It's other people will do it better and think it better. The standard book is made of pages, either paper or virtual, with words on them, right? It's fixed in format and sequencing. The author tries to identify the best way of presenting the information or whatever it is on the basis of an imaginary target audience. Oh, who's going to read my book? Oh, it'll be students in first year undergraduate classes. Oh, okay. Oh, no, it will be people at the MA level. I will change the way I talk. The standard book maintains its identity and its author's identity. The dynamic book, on the other hand, takes many forms. For instance, you could get a computer system to write the book for you on the basis of the latest information. So you might say to ChatGPT today, write me an introductory text about quantum mechanics, and you will get something. Maybe not great, but you will get something. And then when ChatGPT writes it for you, author identity is compromised. In other words, people who write books are going to find that their identity is no longer so important, because there will be people who can write books 1,000 times a day, 1,000,000 times a day, and maybe these books will be reasonably good for certain things. So you can have variations on this. For example, if you are a non-native speaker of English and you're learning English, you might ask somebody to write the book, and the book is written in English originally. You might ask ChatGPT to write the book at a specific CEFR level, so e.g. B2. Another possibility is it may be that you find it difficult to understand the concepts. Well, in that case, you could ask the book to explain the content of the book, the passages that you're having difficulty with. You might explain it as though you were a 5-year-old. And also, the reader may not like the logic of the presentation of the book because people have different forms of logic. And in that case, the reader of any particular book might request the book itself to explain its order of information and why it's dealing with that particular content before another. So, the system can provide explanations pretty much for everything. If they are, however, you also need to make sure that they are good explanations, and that's where one of the problems with artificial intelligence can occur, especially when things like ChatGPT go into what are called hallucinations. But anyway, if all else fails, and you don't understand either the generated book or the book that you might have uploaded to ChatGPT or to someone else, the student can request the system to regenerate the entire textbook, to rewrite it. And there are many more possibilities which distinguish dynamic books from ordinary books. So continuing with possibilities, the learner can ask the system to read aloud parts of the book. How about that? So you can vary your place of study. You can put it in your car as you're driving, or you're sitting in the train or whatever. And you can also ask for written or spoken summaries of things in a textbook. We have this already. You upload a PDF to ChatGPT and say, summarize this for me. And then you can engage, if you like, in a discussion with the AI system. Well, that's interesting, because then you can say, well, look, I don't believe this, I don't understand it. Can you explain it to me? Oh, I don't understand your explanation. Well, how about you try another way of explaining it to me? And the book may try to do that. So, taking together all of these possibilities enhance in utterly unexpected ways the learning experience because you don't know what you're going to need when you need it. And of course, that personalizes the learning process. So defining a new kind of book is good, but you can also take this one step further in a learner, in a kind of self-managed perspective. Okay, so it doesn't have to be always the teacher that manages everything. You can actually get the student to do some self-management. And the self-management can be completely self-managed, or it can be just partially self-managed. So there are many solutions. Now, here's something. The learners can create their own lessons. How about that? Their own lessons which meet their own needs, as opposed to a lesson which meets somebody's imagined needs by course writers and so on. But how can they do that? Well, there are many possibilities. One of them is to give learners a choice of what they would like to learn. Choice. How about choice? And then you have maybe a template, present that information or that material or that exercise or that language or that whatever to them. Here's an example taken from language learning that I wrote many, many years ago to show you that AI is not necessary for this. This is 40 years old, believe it or not. It was written in the Australian Review of Applied Linguistics, and it was about what are called dialogue generators in computer-assisted foreign language learning. Dialogue generators, systems that create dialogues for you of realistic scenarios between people. These scenarios can then be read aloud, or they can be recorded, or they can be now speech synthesized, or they can be part of a listening comprehension program or a reading program or whatever it is that you want. This is a different kind of generation of lesson. It's actually a learner-generated exercise for intonation, and intonation is really, really important, much more than you might think. It's not just about sounding good or intelligible. It's about the organization of grammatical and lexical structures and also pragmatic structures. So in this case, students can create made-to-measure lessons. What's on the left is also an old thing that I wrote a long time ago. I'm showing you old stuff because I wanted you to see that all of this is not new. It's just that we can now do it better. So students can create made-to-measure lessons. In this one here, it's connected to an audiovisual or what we now call multimodal databases of authentic language. And here I was teaching something about French. It's with a show called Les Amours. And in this particular instance, the student wanted to contrast yes-no questions in French with an information question structure. And forget the buttons for the moment, but they picked two yes-no questions which are similar, which means how are you doing or how are you going, ça va? How are you? And then a long question. Messieurs, où avez-vous passé la première nuit de ensemble? Which is, I'm saying it fast for fun, because it illustrates that one is an upward intonation, the other one is a downward intonation. Learners then, in this context, can generate a lesson based on a template by filling in a form. And the lesson here that you've seen is about French intonation. Right, so they ask to contrast yes-no questions with information questions. The system searches for samples in its collection of videos, and learners choose. In this case, they chose three things. Learners can play the examples. They can They can use low-pass filtered versions. I'll explain that a bit later. They can record their own voice. They can compare their voice. And every time the example is called, the video is also played. So it's a very lively, form of lesson generation, and you can be participating very well. Learners can also see micro context, macro context, compare with other patterns, see comments, see the entire recording, or be directed to a different lesson. Well, of course, all of this stuff was based on the idea that we have a collection of materials available and organized and indexed and so on. But all of this was pre-made and took a lot of time to put together. But now, with things like ChatGPT, with Claude and so on, you can extend this hugely, because instead of having to find and store audiovisual materials, ChatGPT or whatever will actually make them itself, either according to teacher criteria or according to student their own judgment, if you let them have judgment. In other words, students and teachers will be able to define and refine, and I like that sentence, partly because it rhymes, but to define and refine accurately the contents of their resources to suit their purposes and learning requirements. And you could even ask for help on how to go about learning. Just as in the case of the modern book, students will be able to produce resources instantly and adjust them to their needs rather than having to find them, saving lots and lots of time, and also engaging in what-if scenarios. What-if scenarios are really quite important, because what a what-if scenario is, you say to the AI system, what if instead of saying blah, 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 I said blue, blue, blue? And the system might say, well, in that case, you might find that blah, 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 something happened. They may not like it. They may feel offended, and so on. Remember that ChatGPT and systems like it are not particularly original in their thinking. They simply mirror what they infer from their data to be societal attitude. But these resources can be used, and that's the important thing, can be used, for example, to sharpen listening skills, show vocabulary at work, generate an entire program. Can you imagine that? You can even imagine a situation where learners, and this is, I want you to digest this for a moment, where learners entirely on their own and self-managed can generate an entire learning program, not just a lesson, but a whole program. Might look a bit like this. A learner at B1 level says, I would like to enrich my French. I used to teach French, by the way. I still speak French. I would like to enrich my French by creating a day on French television. What does that mean? I want to create a simulation of a whole day on French TV. The computer says, sure, are you interested in the French of France or Belgium or Canada or Côte d'Ivoire? Or there are also many other places where French is spoken. Same applies to Spanish. We talk a lot about English all the time, but English isn't actually the only major language or the only international language in the world. Spanish, of course, is all of Latin America, and Spanish-related languages like Portuguese are the whole of Brazil. Okay. And of course, Spain has had all kinds of influences around the world, including the Philippines, as we know. So the learner says, it's very traditional, I want to learn Parisian French. The computer says, okay, I will create a sequence of typical programs of a day on a private French TV channel. It produces a sequence of programs including news, weather forecasts, talk shows, game shows, cooking shows, and so on. And the learner decides which programs are of interest, and the computer generates examples of these programs, at this time in detail, with the learner with the words and the grammar and the pragmatic appropriateness for each program. The learner can then use these generated programs to learn new French, sharpen their listening, practice speaking, discover new cultural events, discover even how to cook things, and so on. When they do not understand something, they ask for explanations, and the computer can also be set up to test the development of their language. When they cannot pronounce something as checked by the computers, you can get the computer to check the pronunciation, they seek help. If they're unable to detect their own problems, such as pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, and so on, they ask the computer to monitor the progress of the things that they're interested in, or even that they're not interested in. The computer acts as an intelligent interlocutor, making suggestions to help the learners, if it can, because it might not be able to do everything, or directing them to humans in a connected human network. This might look like the rhizomatic network we looked at earlier. So we have a combination of machine support and human support. Both the production of materials and interactions can be multimodal: audio, video, text, print, pictures, and so on. Gestural, we keep forgetting gestural. Students can then produce and perform their own day on French television, if that's what the goal is. But in following the path to the production of their day on French television, they will learn a lot of language. This is not crazy, by the way, and most of it can actually be done today. You can go home to your students or your future students and do it now with ChatGPT. It's a bit difficult for some of the things, but it is quite doable today. It will get easier as people develop integrated programs for accessing the systems like ChatGPT. So, recent technological developments have the potential to change the learning landscape, and I think we need to understand this. Things will never be the same again. Yes, you can worry about ChatGPT, you can worry about AI, but you're not going to stop it. So you can say, oh, it's bad, or whatever it is that you want to say about it. And some of it is bad, or risky. Maybe not bad, but risky. So we need to legislate for that. But you won't stop it. But we need to investigate changes further. But look, there's more. There's actually more. While technology has been developing, research into learning has also been happening. And I'd like to focus on two relatively new developments in education. One is called precision education, and the second one is the interface between perception and learning. And I wanted to say that these are two areas that I work in with specific reference to language learning. So, precision education. Precision education is a research-based refinement of individualization and personalization, and feeds directly into adaptive learning. Now, you've heard about adaptive learning, you've heard about self-managed learning, you've heard about all of these things, but they are sometimes a little bit too gross. By gross, I mean that they are too broad. Now we can go beyond that. So it goes beyond the processes we generally offer. This comes out of tradition of medicine. The initial concept came out of precision medicine. Precision medicine can be thought of in the following way. Traditional medicine, which is the top diagram here, traditional medicine is basically one treatment fits all. So if you have cancer, we use one approach on everybody, and it works for some, has no effect for others, and it kills others, for example. With precision medicine, we now have more personalized diagnostics. We do more tests on people. We identify their DNA. We discover what enzymes are running through their bodies, and so on. And in the end, if we do this properly, then what we have is treatment that is personalized for everybody, and everybody has a chance. Basically, precision education says that we can refine the ways in which we present learning to students. I'll say it again because the network's apparently unstable. Basically, it says that we can refine the ways in which we present learning to students, or the ways in which students This assumes that we can accurately or more accurately identify and measure some or all of a student's learning needs, and as a result enhance their learning experience. These things are not learning needs as in needs analyses. Needs analyses reveal nothing about people's real learning needs. And we can discuss this later if you want to. The simplest example I can think of is adjusting the difficulty level of a reading or listening or reading text, not just to an approximate or statistical level, but to a level which exactly represents the student's exact actual level of knowledge. Now, there are many ways of determining this, but the most accurate way is likely to be through AI itself. And this will make both the diagnostic and implementation phases of precision education much more feasible and valuable. Second one is the interface between perception and learning. Our research group is investigating this key concept. And here we go. I'll take a few minutes to explain this. We've got plenty of time. Any act of learning requires an act of meaning-making on the part of learners. I'll say it again, because it's very important. Any act of learning requires an act of meaning-making on the part of learners. And perception is the first line of engagement with the world and filters what is allowed to reach our brain for further processing. Perception sits between us and the world. Perception, therefore, has gatekeeping function, where understood and familiar signals are retained. And the knowledge that we already have can act as a barrier to the knowledge we want to get. How about that? What we already have in our heads stops us from learning. In order for learning to happen, the perception process has to be negotiated. One way of achieving this is to develop awareness raising. And the theoretical framework that we have been using is called verbotonalism. You've never heard of verbotonalism? Well, you have now. And we have been doing quite a lot of work in Thailand on this already, and China, and Vietnam, and Indonesia. Verbotonalism has many techniques for raising learners' awareness to pronunciation and other phenomena. Awareness raising, okay, I'll repeat it because it's worth repeating. Awareness raising is also a key component of learning within the theory of knowledge construction and learning that we use in our work. And there are some references there. For further epistemological details, you can see these people, including Lian and Pineda from the Philippines, in an article about rhizomatic systems. Now, one of the things that we have chosen to focus on is a technique called filtering, because we work a lot with spoken language, pronunciation, and other forms of spoken signals. That filtering is often called low-pass filtering. It's okay, I'll tell you in a minute a little more. We use filtering to enhance learners' perceptions of foreign languages. And low-pass filtering is used for many things. If you have never heard low-pass filtered language before, here is an example. I'm about to give you an example. I hope. So, I hope you can hear. I'm about to play something. I hope you can hear it.
Hello, how are you?
Can you hear it? Somebody say yes or no.
Yes, I can hear.
Hello, can somebody hear that? Good. All right, well, that's normal language. It's a bit funny because I made it a bit funny, and I wanted you to see the intonation curve at the bottom here. See the hello, how are you? They're very Australian and very exaggerated. Never mind. But there's a reason for it. So now that's a normal language. Now I'm going to bring up the filtered language. If you look at the bottom here on the right, if you look at the graph at the bottom, you can see the blue line, which still represents the intonation pattern, but we have removed a lot of sound. This is what it sounds like, filtered. Try again. Same sentence.
Hello, how are you?
Same sentence. But what you have in the bottom one is the intonation of the sentence. And what you also have is a very low frequency production of that intonation. I can't spend time telling you about this. If you want to find out more, you can contact me or read some of my stuff. All right, so we use low frequencies because they make intonation and prosodic features more salient. As the body is very sensitive to low frequencies, I'd like you to think of language learning as a whole body activity. It is not just something that you do in your head, it is something that you do using your entire body. And thirdly, low frequencies target the right brain hemisphere, the part of the right side of your skull. At the moment, we give and this works for the vast majority of students. But we do not know if this frequency will work at its most effective level. Hello? Are you trying to say something to me?
Hello, Professor. Can you hear me? We can still hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Hello? Okay, so I'm okay. I can continue.
Yes, sir. Yeah, please, Professor.
Say yes or no. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, all right. So we don't know if this frequency will work at its most effective level for all students. And if it does not, is there a way of adjusting this frequency so that everyone can actually improve, not just a subgroup? Or can we adjust other aspects? Let me illustrate. As a first step, we might vary the cutoff frequency from 320 to other frequencies like 200, 220, 240, and so on. Should we make the volume higher or lower? Should we change the form of input from diotic signal, where people listen through both ears, to the same signal, both ears to the same signal, to dichotic, where people listen to different signals through each ear? And this last approach is full of potential. Here is an example from a slightly different project, which I performed with my colleague, Dr. Tsai Hui in China. We decided to test optimization. And what we did is we took a dichotic signal, right? A dichotic signal is if we send, and we said the following: if we send each brain hemisphere the information it is designed to deal with, then the processing effort might be reduced and perhaps redirected to other activity, and therefore make learning more efficient, right? So dichotic signal is what you see here. You hear one signal in the left ear, the other signal in the right ear. What you need to know is that the signals sent to the left ear go primarily to the right side of the brain, and the signals sent to the right ear go primarily to the left side of the brain. And that is exactly what happens. We discovered through instrumental monitoring with electroencephalograms that, and through fMRI technology. So this is language learning of the future in some sense. This is where we do our research about language learning. We did it through EEGs, and now we also did it through this machine on the right is fMRI, and there are new developments since then. The implications are huge. Chinese learners of English process English best with left ear filtered and right ear unfiltered. And the load was heaviest when we swapped the ears. So we now have the means to make language learning biologically more efficient. And we have to wonder, is this only for tonal languages or not? So tuning the bandwidth to the individual learner will be something that AI can help us do nicely. And so we're experimenting with different contexts for improving language performance. One of the things is we just finished a project where with double-blind performance ratings, we discovered that students performing identical learning activities, except for the form of physical input, experienced a performance improvement of almost 7% on the tests used, with an effect size of 0.57, which is quite good. So, what does it mean? Just exposure to a different type of audio input increases your learning efficiency. Yet, but it is significant. And these discoveries are being followed up in many different ways, including listening with Dr. Luti Maivi in Vietnam, for example. In all of these situations, we've improved students' performances by enhancing the physical audio signal to which they're listening. This is very important. You can actually manipulate, you can actually change the physical signal that people are listening to. And this brings about a learning improvement with no effort on their part, no intellectual effort. Well, at this stage, our studies have tended to produce a generalization. Okay, so now we know that there are some improvements statistically, but we don't know whether we can tune this to individuals, and we will certainly be trying to do this better. So if you could tune the input to provide the best signal possible for each learner, then that would create a whole new world of learning. So taken together, these three features of modern education, the growing social demand for personalization, the availability upon request for free, more or less, very cheap, of AI generative systems that can meet some of that demand, and changes in educational theory and practice, specifically in my case, precision education and radically new approaches to learning, the stage is set not just for an enhancement of the learning process in all areas, but perhaps more importantly, the development of a radically new and revolutionary learning paradigm or paradigms that may change the entire educational landscape by enabling new mindsets and new ways of thinking. Mindsets and new ways of thinking. Similar to the development of quantum physics, for example, at a time when many reputable physicists believed that basic secrets of physics had been discovered at the end of the 19th century. And what happened is Maxwell was saying, oh, we just need to measure better. And Max Planck said, no. We have to redefine what physics is. He did that and created quantum physics. So I hope we've enjoyed our time together. I thank you. I think we are looking at some wonderful times ahead. Whether teachers lose their jobs or not, I don't know. Some probably will, some probably won't. The point is that those of us who work with AI, and this is a variation on a very old theme. Teachers with AI are likely to replace teachers without AI. So I will leave it at that. Do I need to do anything? My screen looks very strange. But anyway, it is what it is. Hello, my students in Ho Chi Minh City. I can see the others.
Hello, Professor.
Okay, I'm
Thank
stopping
you.
there. I hope you were able. Hello. I hope you can hear me clearly, and I'm ready to answer any questions. It's a very complicated, very new area that we're going into.
Thank you very much, Professor Andrew Lian. I'm sorry for pronouncing your name incorrectly for me the first time.
You
So,
couldn't know.
yeah.
You couldn't know. It's okay. And I answered to all of these. Please don't worry.
Thank you. I would like to request your material, if you don't mind, of course. You can probably send your material into the Zoom chat.
Maybe.
Yeah, for our participants to get access to it.
Okay, let me discover how this works. I've never done it before. Anyway, don't worry. I'll do it after the Q&A.
Okay. Or if it's more convenient for you, you can send your material to the email, attach it to your email, and send to our external relationship. Yeah.
I might do it.
Mr. TB. Okay, we'll move on to the Q&A session. And it seems like Mr. TB has some questions to ask.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, excellent talk. I really appreciated the humor and the research insights. And one thing that I thought about was motivation. And I worked with a guy, an English teacher years ago, who was even older than you, if you'd believe it.
No, I don't believe
it. He made a good point that a motivated student with a dictionary can learn a language on their own. And I just wonder if you have any opinion about the way AI may change the motivation of the students to do the learning on their own. As you say, the tools are there and have been there for a long time.
Thank you. I mean, that's a good question. A motivated student with a dictionary can learn some things. Everybody can learn something from something. And that's the attitude that you talk about is actually something that was said to me roughly in 1970 something by one of my colleagues. He said, I believe that language learning works if you have a good dictionary and a good grammar book. And there's no doubt that some people do manage to learn that way. The point is, we're no longer in a time space where people where we're really aiming for a small number of high level speakers. I think now with ASEAN, with the mobility issues which will happen between ASEAN countries, we are looking at a mass market. All universities now, for example, are aiming for, in Thailand, are aiming for B1 or B2 exit levels of English, and many are not achieving that. So we need to find ways of improving, not necessarily, I mean, yes, if you spend all of your time studying with a dictionary and a grammar book, you will definitely learn something. Of course, you may not sound particularly good. You know, no one might understand you, and you will not have the flexibility of adapting to situations. And that, of course, is what we're aiming for, all of us, in terms of our language learning. We are no longer aiming to produce people who speak only one variety of English or whatever language, but actually we're aiming for people who are flexible, who are adaptable, and who are able to deal with face-to-face situations, particularly in professional environments. And that, of course, leads on to the issue of time management and of lifelong learning. So there's a whole bunch of stuff which is there. In terms of motivation, I think that people I have two views about motivation. I think we overrate the necessity to force people to learn things. Oh, how can I motivate my students to learn English? Well, here's the point. We can reformulate that question into saying, how can I force a group of people who don't want to learn English because I've said so? And that's not a very good place to be. If they don't have any motivation to learn English, then in many cases they shouldn't be learning English. The second thing is, if we look at the proficiency scores, if you look at the EF proficiency index, for example, the Education First Proficiency Index for the last 11, 12 years now, what do we notice about Thailand? Thailand has not shifted out of the low proficiency level for 12 years. And we have spent money to motivate people. We have had boot camps. We've had initiatives to hire 10,000 native speakers of English to come and fix us. We've asked the British Council to fix us. We've asked, the British government is now being approached again to fix us. And I'm actually quite certain that none of this will work. Why is that? I think there are two reasons. The first reason is that people don't necessarily feel the need to learn English. And you can say to them, oh, one day you will get a better job because you've learned English. But you know what? When everybody has learned English, there will be no English advantage. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that we are still using teaching approaches and teaching methods which have demonstrably not worked in the Thai context. And despite the, how can I put this? Despite the intervention of British Council, RELO, and so on. And this is not special to Thailand, by the way. It's all over ASEAN. Nothing has moved in ASEAN for the last 11 years. China's gone up, and I know it's not in ASEAN, but China went up and then it went down again. Vietnam has just managed to scrape into the moderate level. It's the last one on the list of proficiency scores, with a score of 503 or something like that. So I think we have a real problem, and we have to solve it by getting out of the stagnation of the methodological stagnation of language teaching and learning as it is practiced not just in Thailand but everywhere. By the way, I don't think that the levels of Spanish in the United States are improving much. I think they're staying at the same level. Nothing is moving. Why? Because we keep doing what Einstein said was the definition of madness, which is we keep expecting change by doing the same thing. So we need to stop doing the same thing and start thinking in different ways. So I don't know, that's a very long answer to what should have been a simple question. Could have been no, it's not a simple question. It's a very difficult question. Thank you.
It was a good answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question and answer. And another one of our participants has a question for you. He says, how do you foresee ChatGPT influencing various aspects of society in the future? And what potential benefits or challenge do you anticipate as it becomes more integrated into everyday life?
The answer is I have no idea. And I have no idea. I don't say this because I don't want to try and answer it, but I have no idea because the world is changing so fast as a result of things like ChatGPT. I don't have a problem with ChatGPT. I think what we have to do is do what we do best, what society does best, and that is to adapt. We have adapted to many things. People used to say, well, how do you think the motor car is going to change life in the future? And people said, oh, well, we have to make sure the motor car doesn't destroy the society as it is today, doesn't run people over. And so what did they do when the motor car happened? They put a guy with a flag who had to walk in front of the motor car for a while, until the motor car, they kicked the guy out of the way and drove faster. So, life will change. It will change for everybody. it will change, I think, for English language teachers. But if you are at the top of your field, and if you are involved in research, there will always be a demand for high-level people. It may be that many of the things that we're talking about, many of the things I was talking about, can be done by AI, for example, and better than humans. Sorry, guys. For example, we have a better diagnosis of people's perceptual systems in order to be able to better feed into the ways in which they process language, for example. So teachers can't do that. Teachers cannot modify, for example, physiology of the physiology of people. They cannot modify the ways in which they can change and manipulate audio signals for learners of language. So the short answer is, in terms of your question, I don't know how ChatGPT will influence things. I know it's there. I know it's not going away. I know people will worry about it, but they have always worried about technology. For example, I'll just give you this as the last example. When calculators appeared, people were very worried about students no longer being able to do multiplications or additions and subtraction and so on. And by the way, that was not the only piece of technology used for mathematics. Before the calculator, there was a thing called a slide rule, right, which is a smart piece of wood that you could manipulate to do calculations for you. And what happened? Well, guess what? We have managed to survive. And what also happened is that mathematics schools and departments have adapted and are now making the most of the facilities which are available. So I have an optimistic view of the future, but we also need to make sure that ChatGPT is not used to create an atomic bomb or to suggest that suicide, for example, is a good option for people, or how to, go about destroying people. So I think there needs to be some regulation, and I'm sure the regulators are already working on it. But in terms of motivation, I think that look, there's an old saying that I have, which is, nothing succeeds like success. Nothing succeeds like success. If you can make people more successful individually by giving them access to tools for learning, of which ChatGPT happens to be one, then give it to them. Because at the moment, we are pretty much set up for failure. The opposite of nothing succeeds like success is nothing fails like failure. And if you look at the internal results of proficiency tests in universities, there's a lot of failure going on, despite a lot of teaching going on. I'll leave it there.
And as for my own question, I would like to ask you, what significant challenges or obstacles do educators and institutions face when they try to incorporate learner-generated resources into official educational frameworks, and how might these challenges be overcome?
Well, the challenge is basically intellectual. You need to change you need to change people's mindsets, and you need to start worrying about the power structures of education. And I think that's one of the challenges that many of my students have when we talk about research and doctoral research and so on. They say, oh, we can do this research, but no one will let us do it because the government says blah, blah, blah. But actually, what you have to do is, A, do the research in order to be able to bring about change, and to bring about changes in mentalities and mindsets. And so I don't have a major issue intellectually with that. I do have a major issue with the fact that we do what I mentioned Einstein said before, which is we keep doing the same thing. And when we go into educational systems and we teach people at master's level and sometimes at doctoral level, we keep saying, this is how you teach English. Well, maybe we've got it wrong. And maybe we need to start thinking differently. Because what we happen to do is there's a machinery in place to keep the system as it is. And the machinery is not just in universities and in schools, and in people's heads, by the way. It is also in terms of the book industry and the publishing industry, which just keeps producing more and more of these things. And in addition to that, it's also a question of things like training colleges, right? If you want to get a job in Thailand, you have to get a certificate in TESOL. Well, you do 150 hours of training, and then you get the certificate. What do you think the certificates in TESOL contains? Do you think they contain anything radically new or research-based? No, they repeat the same things and tell you what to do. Well, at best, you know, we will learn a bit. And by the way, before I go away, and by the way, what do people remember about their study? I have a question which I often ask my students, and my Vietnamese students are here, and they know the question. The question is, what do you know? What people remember from the MA is close to nothing, unfortunately. And if you ask them what big names do you remember, they come up with 2 names. Anyone want to guess? Come on. Try guessing, guys. Okay, never mind. I'll tell you.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Chomsky
good.
and Krashen.
Who said that?
TB.
TB. Okay, TB, you got it. It's exactly right. Chomsky and Krashen. Chomsky and Krashen. They're the 2 names that people remember. Actually, there are many, many, many more. And where did you get that, TB?
I did a master's with an Australian university, and those are the 2 names that first came to mind.
Really? How wonderful! How wonderful! I did an international survey, very small one, very small international survey, and they are the 2 names that came up. Amazing stuff, and that's all people remember. And actually, they never use that in reality. They never remember. Sometimes they remember Chomsky. They remember Krashen. But Chomsky is about, you know, as useless as any. And I like Chomsky personally. I mean, I think he's done a lot of work, not useful work, because 60 years of him, and now we know it doesn't work. But anyway, I still like Chomsky personally. But I think there's a problem. We don't remember things. We don't act on them. So now's the time to get rid of all that and start a new generation of intellect at work. So that's my answer. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your answer. As for my second question would be, how do educators or teachers balance their role as facilitators, as mentors in guiding students to develop and select their own learning resources in the rise of AI tools and platforms?
There's a word which we use magically in the field, and it's called autonomy. Autonomy is another word for freedom. So give people freedom. Say to them, off you go. Do something. So you can either let them be entirely in charge, a bit like when I suggested that they could go and ask ChatGPT how to do a day on French television. It doesn't have to be a day on French television. It can be whatever it is that they like. So you can get them to do that, or you can say, well, we have to study about the language of health, right? So if you want to be a nurse, if you want to be a doctor, you have to be able to interact with people who speak English or other foreign languages. By the way, there are other foreign languages. And in order to do that, we're kind of in a situation where we are no longer in control. Teachers have to learn to give up control. So you can set a big picture. If you look at Sugata Mitra's work, if you even look at my work, you give people big goals, big objectives, and then you let them construct the internal workings of how they reach the big objectives. I mean, Sugata Mitra did this with molecular biology, for example. He said, oh, you know, what's molecular biology? And then the kids went and discovered what molecular biology was. Well, they did, whether they did it well or not, but then they also have teachers as part of the system. Teacher is a resource. So I don't like the word facilitator. I don't know. I mean, facilitator tends to be, oh, I want you to reach my goal. Well, students will never reach your goal. They will reach something that makes you happy enough. So yeah, I mean, let's make it more open. Give them power and see what happens. The problem is, this time, is generally administration. You have to do it within a certain time period. And maybe that's not enough for some. So maybe we need to look at, and I think one of the things that's going to happen with ChatGPT and other systems like that is that educational systems may go more towards what we might call challenge exams, or more towards proficiency-based exit points, so that you don't have to, everybody has to do 12 weeks, and at the end of the 12 weeks you will be given an exam, that when you are given this exam you will be able to be at B2, and if you're not at B2 you will have to go back and do more work and repeat the course or whatever. I think we're going to move towards something which is, it's going to be very slow, but I think we will move towards a system where when people are ready to get out, they get out, and when people are ready to come in, they come in. So, and when they are in the system, they will be much freer than they are now. Now, I'm thinking particularly of university level students, but it actually works with kindergarten kids too. Early childhood work in Australia is showing that. TB, where were you in Australia?
University of Southern Queensland.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And now I would just like to ask something based on your experience. I would like you to share some tactics or approaches that have been successful in using learner-generated content to increase student engagement and also their motivation.
We performed as far back as 1983 or 1984, 1985. We performed something called macro simulation. I'll write it in the box if I can find the general box. Macro simulation was a kind of game structure which was, you had to assume a long-term persona in a simulation of something that we created for the students. This was done in terms of French language. Was a French village. People had to create a French village and interactions within a French village. And what happened was that, well, first of all, we had to create the village geographically, we had to create it, and so that required cultural knowledge. And then we created the village physically. Where was the church? Where was the main street? Where was the railway station? Whatever it was, the police station, so on. So the students created this. Right? So they were the constraints. There were some constraints. We didn't give them a completely free go. And then we had a trigger, which happened to be, there was a scandal in town, and the mayor was involved in the mayor of the village was involved in some disaster, and then there was only one question to answer for the students, and it was, so what's going to happen next? And they had to work out what's going to happen next in French, and they talked in French. There were a number of things that happened. This simulation went on with the same people adopting the same roles, with the same psychological structure in their head for 12 weeks, right? So they didn't just do like, pretend you're going to a French cafe, what do you order? Oh, I'll have a croissant and a coffee. No, it was a lot more. They had to start living the role. And they did, which was amazing. That was an amazing development. We also did two things. We didn't have the resources of the internet and so on, but we did have TV cameras. So we videotaped interactions in this village. And then we also had a feedback session where we all looked at the videos together and said, oh, what went wrong there? This was good, this was not good, this worked, this didn't work. And they were free to construct their own language, they were free to construct their own situations, and they did. And so one of the things that happened, interestingly, was that the village developed a life of its own. And people started talking about their personas as though they were not themselves. They said, oh, instead of saying Andrew did this, they would say, or I did this, they would say, Fred, their persona, did that. And so it was quite interesting. They started living the situation. They started living their role because of the freedom that they had to perform what they wanted to. And one of the outcomes of this macro simulation is that the events of the village actually erupted into the university itself. So they had elections for the village because they got rid of the mayor. They had elections for the village. They had to get people to vote. They went into the corridors of the university, into the gardens of the university, recruiting other people to vote in a particular way. So the point about freedom is that it is also motivating, and it allows you to create motivating. It allows you to self-create motivational structures. And now having access to ChatGPT and other systems like that gives you a lot more power, because you can get a lot more help more immediately, and you can generate stuff more immediately. If we were to redo the macro simulation today, I think it would be a very different sort of structure. Hopefully the outcome would be the same, because we discovered that people's language was richer. In general, the grammar may not have been necessarily all that much better than we could have expected, but the pragmatics of the language was much stronger. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope it does. What's the time? It's 10:30. 10:30? 10:30. We're still half an hour ahead.
All right. Anyone else has any questions to ask Professor Andrew Lian? You can leave your questions in the chat box.
You can even speak them, like Mr. TV.
Professor Andrew, I'm now studying that the newspaper discourses on the artificial intelligence in education as a case study in China, USA, and India. And as you know that China is banned ChatGPT, and not banned. Actually, we could not use it in the mainland China. So now I'm actually using the critical discourse analysis to explore the power dynamics and ideologies behind those newspaper discourses, because this is actually how it affected the public opinion, whether this is a hype or dump of AI, or we see that how we view this it takes. So I was wondering that whether you can give me some suggestions on this project, or is there something that you'd like to know about like China's AI or like development or anything else? Thank you.
Well, I thank you. That's a good question. I know China pretty well, and I work a lot with Chinese students. The issue with, look, I think some countries have made decisions about blocking or not blocking the current systems like ChatGPT, and in fact, as we know, China has blocked Google as well. At the moment, it's easy enough to get around it with VPNs, but who knows, that'll probably get blocked at some stage too. I am certain that China is doing artificial intelligence work. And it will be very interesting to see what comes out of that. So I mean, using CDA to analyze discourses relating to AI in China would be very interesting. But there may be some care that one will have to take in producing the analysis. It would be nice, I think. I mean, I don't have any solutions in terms of the CDA stuff. It's not something that I do, although I obviously know about it. But I would welcome a connection with China's AI systems and the Western systems without the impediments which are currently in place. I can't see that happening for some time, though. Don't know if it answers. Sure, I don't know if it answers your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Before we move on, does anyone else have any questions to ask, Professor?
We've got 25 minutes to kill, guys. I'm just kidding.
I could ask
All right, then.
one more.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
Please.
my background keeps changing. I'm listening and going around the apartment doing stuff. Rhizomatic learning. Are you using rhizomes in the Deleuzian sense?
I came to rhizomatic learning not through Deleuze and Guattari. And I came to it through a theory of knowledge, which kind of self-constructed theory of knowledge, which is primarily based on meaning making. And meaning making is primarily individual in nature. And as a consequence of that, I came up with what I call the 3 C's. The 3 C's I call confront, contrast, and contest, which is a way of thinking about the processes that we go through, kind of in a theoretical sense, of the processes that we go through when we are trying to learn something, which is we have to confront what it is that we are in the process of trying to learn. We need to contrast that with what is in our heads. But that is not a simple process, by the way. That the contrasting part is extraordinarily difficult because of the interface between perception and the world and us. And that's a different story. We can talk about the separation between mind and body for that. And then contest is to say, well, am I right? Is what I think correct? And so all of that leads to the notion of differences between people which are irreconcilable with the imposition of a one-size-fits-all model, particularly a syntagmatic model or a tree-based model where you just go down different paths. So in that sense, And yeah. And then I discovered, well, not exactly then, but at about the same time, I also discovered Guattari and, Deleuze and Guattari, and came up with, and just adopted the term rhizomatic because I think it fits very well. But rhizomatic is not the only way of thinking about it. As I pointed out before, there is a convergence happening at the moment in the world between what people are actually doing in real life and also theoretically with stuff like Sugata Mitra's work on self-organizing learning environments. I think that they're all coming together. We're all approximating in the same direction. And also the Sudbury, things like the Sudbury Valley school system, the Montessori school system, and so on. So I think that yes, we are all rhizomatic in a way. The world is rhizomatic in nature, but education isn't and doesn't like it because it looks chaotic. And so, but it isn't necessary. Well, I mean, you can go into complexity theory if you want to do that. But the world is not necessarily.
My dissertation uses complexity theory. I'm just taking a break from reading about that to listen to you.
Oh, thank you. Very nice. Yeah, no, I don't actually, because complexity theory is well, you can tell us about complexity theory. Well, you can. I mean, if your dissertation is about complexity theory, then you can. And I mean, I'm looking at people like Hiver and Ali Houri, and Diane Larson Freeman, who are looking into, and for that matter, to some extent, the Douglas Fir group. You all heard of the Douglas Fir group? Yes, no? Okay, look it up, Douglas Fir, F-I-R. It's a group of people who think that, who kind of posited themselves as the world experts in SLA. It's the new world of SLA. And they had a meeting in a hotel once upon a time, and they in a room called the Douglas Fir room, and apparently they took the name of the room. So congratulations on working on complexity theory. It's something I haven't worked very much with at all, but I think that at least chaos, the regulation of chaos is going to be something quite important. And maybe we don't have to regulate chaos. That I think is part of the problem. What looks chaotic is actually not chaotic. And if I can put it that way, education loves to regulate and takes what is not regulated as chaotic. But the chaos that we have, that we appear to have in our head, is not chaotic. It is actually the result of our logical and representational systems. I think TB has disappeared. So if you want to think of it in this way, this is very important. All of us have in our heads visual, logical, and representational systems that we use in order to make sense of the world, and which are affected by the world, and the world has to go through what I call the interface between perception and learning. So it's not simple, but we tend to simplify it because it's sometimes too much to handle. So I'll stop there. Pity TB has disappeared. Mr. TB, where are you?
Professor Andrew, may I ask another question?
Of course.
I'm particularly interested about the precision education you mentioned, which is quite aligned to this adaptive learning. So I was wondering that based on the learners' different personality, learning style, and different goals, could you give us a case that how you applied this precision education to your class? I mean, especially in the classroom. Thank you.
Well, yeah, a good question, but this is so new that it hasn't been applied very much at all. I have a student of mine, Wenfeng Wei, from Guangdong. University, anyway, who did some study on Ganang University, and he used a theory called verbotonal theory that I mentioned in my talk to manipulate the 6 vowel sounds that are problematic in Chinese learners of English. And I'll just use one pair to illustrate. The pair is ship and sheep, E and E. And what he did was he did a very, very good thesis. It was a wonderful thesis. We've only published one article out of it, but we will do more soon. He did the following. He took sentences with ship, let's say ship and sheep. Okay, so one sentence had blah, 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 ship, and another one sentence said something sheep. And he just cut out the vowel sound I and E, and then he filtered that sound according to what is called a set of optimal frequencies. Now, the optimal frequencies were the result of experiments carried out in the 70s, but he changed those to make them more precise, narrower in bandwidth, and he modified them in ways that I can't explain now, but he changed them. And then he added some low frequencies as well. And so he took these frequencies that he was playing with, and he had 13 frequencies that he played with, and he gave them to a group of Chinese students, and then he played it to them, and then he listened to what they said. So they heard something, and then he listened. Is this correct? Is ship pronounced correctly? Is sheep pronounced correctly? And he identified 3 major frequency bands, which seemed to work for most people. So 86% of people liked one frequency, but 7% of people liked another frequency, and another 7% liked a different frequency. And so what he then did is he took a group of students learning English, or learning to pronunciation of English, and then he gave to each group of students those 3 frequencies, and he gave to each student, stated a preference. I prefer this one, or no, I prefer that one, or I prefer that one. He gave each of the students the preferences that they preferred and where they performed best. Right? So he listened to them and said, oh yeah, I will give you this one. Oh, you like this frequency, I will give you that one. And then he gave those students their preferred frequencies, and he told them to go away and do some repetition exercises. And he did the same thing, exactly the same thing, with students who had another group of students, a control group, which had no filtered sounds. They just had the natural sound. And the group with the filtered sound performed 6 times better than the group without filtered sounds. And this is without anybody coaching them. They just listened to the different frequencies. But it was the frequencies that suited them, not a general model of frequencies. So we can refine this even further, I think, and narrow it down, but that would have taken another 3 PhDs to do. So yeah, and I think, yes, he did 2 things. One is he redefined a basic notion of the verbotonal theory, which was about what is an optimal frequency. And then he identified for Chinese learners some very specific frequencies that will apply, as I said, not just one frequency, but several frequencies to the society of people that he was using at the time, which is a group from Ganang University. So we need to generalize it some more. We need to replicate it. We need to see if this works with the students from non-tonal languages. So I hope that answers your question.
I really like this case study.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a great study. It's a great study.
And for the last question of this session from our participant, he just sent a direct message to me asking how teachers and students implement personalized learning powered by AI and measure the outcomes accurately.
Are we measuring accurately at the moment? So that's my first question. Are we measuring accurately? We can measure the outcomes as accurately as we can measure outcomes today. With proficiency tests, whether we use IELTS or EF or well, probably we shouldn't use any of these things. I think we should probably move to different forms of assessment. But the forms of assessment that we are using are the same, or would be the same as whatever we're using today, or make it better. So if you're worried about reaching standards, don't be worried, because it's as good as anything that the measurement is different from the activities. Right? So the measurement is the measurement. Use what you want to measure. Now, let me give you a quick example from a study done in Thailand. And the study was a comparison of tourism students. One group of students worked totally independently inside of a virtual world, a bit like Second Life, but not Second Life. There they interacted, they were doing tourism, and they had to do 3 big tasks, 3 kind of macro tasks. And they performed those tasks on their own by talking to native speakers online and by interacting with native speakers online. They were not beginner students, they were intermediate level students. And the results, these people were tested, and the results were compared with students who were doing a traditional class in tourism. But what did we discover? Well, the grammatical level was about the same, but again, the pragmatic flexibility, the richness of the language was much greater for those students who were interacting on their own, no teacher. Were much better for those students than it was for the students who followed the class. So that's kind of interesting. What is a better result? Well, it's whatever you think is appropriate, but it seems to me that what the better result is when you have people who are more flexible, who are more able to produce better language, more interesting language, and interact better than those who will produce similar grammatical structures but without the richness. How's that for an answer? Is that an answer? I don't know. It'll do.
All right. Thank you so much for your answer, and thank you for your speech, Professor Andrew Lian. Right now, I would like to recap a little bit about this session. So, Professor Andrew Lian began with how AI technology influenced 21st society to evolve their expectations, and how people now expect highly personalized solutions to their individual problems, and not only getting help from it, but also learning from it. And this is also known as rhizomatic learning. And he mentioned some big factors that influence the 21st century to evolve, which are COVID-19, which we all know that changed the way we learn completely, and also a very useful AI tool like ChatGPT. And he showed us how we can think of the world as a big rhizomatic learning system. For those who don't know, rhizomatic learning systems are dynamic systems that provide opportunities for learners to self-manage and solve their moment learning issues on a just-in-time basis that he mentioned. He also mentioned that the concern with personalization in general, one of them is that people are different and require personal assistance. And this means that the course design will have to move away from preset activities and to paths to achieve understanding of content will vary from person to person. And modern technology will be able to help teachers with that. An example is shown when he further mentioned the example of dynamic book, which you can use. You can get the computer system to write the book for you at your specific level of English proficiency and on the basis of the latest information. And author identity will now be compromised. You can uh, ask them to explain the concepts of anything that you might find difficult to understand. And the dynamic book will simplify the content for you to understand it better. Moreover, he suggested that the learners can also create their own lessons by giving a choice of what they want to learn and prepare a template for them. He then showed an example of learner-generated intonation exercises and how AI tools like ChatGPT can extend the audio-visual materials by making them itself, resulting that you might not need to find or store those materials yourself. Then he further highlighting the importance of learner-generated individualized learning and how it has such a big impact on 21st century. So once again, anyone who would like to get the handouts, you can get access to our website and the materials will be on there. And before we go, Professor, I would like you to leave all of us your thoughts and directions for our future, please.
Oh, well, first of all, can you remove my face from the screen? Sorry. First of all, congratulations on managing to summarize that long talk. I think you did a great job. I think that the future looks really good, but I also think that it only looks good if we determine to adopt new mindsets and we embrace change, not just change within technology, but change socially, which will result from that, and also deal with. Remember one thing, and this is what our previous speaker said. Kind of hinted. The important thing is people. It's not the technology. I think we need to remember that we use the technology to help the people. That's how I started working with computers and language learning many years ago, and I think that we must not forget that in our enthusiasm for the technology. I think it's easy to become enthusiastic, but the technology has changed our lives, even if we don't think it has, even if we resist it. Even those who say that we must be careful know that change has happened already. So we need to embrace change. I think for Asia, and particularly ASEAN countries, we need to do something which radically changes our proficiency scores in tests like EF and TOEFL. EF actually correlates quite highly with TOEFL and IELTS, so we have nothing to be particularly happy about, and we need to do something. So the key for that is novelty and sound approaches to learning. Let me give you one final example. We did a study in Indonesia on academic writing, which contrasted the academic writing using an approach using a combination of a new text approach called reading for emotion with verbotonal approaches to the rhythms of academic writing. And we contrasted that with systemic functional linguistics and its use of a genre-based approach to teach academic writing. And we've done this twice now. One was entirely online, the other one was face-to-face. And in both cases, the SFL approach created no progress. And this was done with double-blind raters. The raters didn't know whether they were rating pre-test, post-test, control, or experimental. The SFL approach made no progress in both cases. The new approach had an improvement ratio of approximately 11:1 over the scores of the SFL approach. So, you know, SFL is big deal, big time, particularly. SFL is systemic functional linguistics, by the way, in case I didn't mention. Systemic functional linguistics based on Hallidaean linguistics. SFL is the mandated approach by the Indonesian government. And SFL is also very popular, particularly in the Australian context. And yet, this highly acclaimed thing didn't produce the goods. And this may be one of the few studies which were independent from SFL itself to show the outcomes. Remember, double-blind raters were experienced editors, journal editors, looking at academic writing of undergraduates. So we have to change our mindsets in order to move forward. As Max Planck said, and I'll leave you with that, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. Okay, thank you very much. And it's been a great pleasure to talk to everybody. I'm delighted. I've talked at Silpakorn University before, and I'm stunned by the level of the students. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Professor Andrew Lian. It's a pleasure to have you here as well. That was such an informative and detailed discussion on the topic. Once again, thank you for participating in this event.